Hello, I'm Brandon, and we're going to be going over the GX20 Dry Treater. So the GX20 is meant to apply a liquid fertilizer onto a dry fertilizer. So either if you have a volumetric blender, a rotary drum blender, or some sort of volumetric or declining weight system, the GX20 would be able to apply that product for you. Now, the great part about the GX20 is that you can apply really low rates, such as like 16 ounces a ton, and you can even get a little lower. So say if you're on a volumetric or declining weight setup where you have your dry that's coming across the auger and your spray tip's at a certain point, say if you're moving 1 ton per minute, and on that 1 ton you have to put out 16 ounces of your product, then you'd be putting out 16 ounces per minute. Say if you're moving 2 ton, and again you still have to put out 16 ounces per minute, you double your rate, so 32 ounces per minute, the system would be able to handle. Looking at the plumbing of the system, on the inlet here, we have a 50 mesh filter. We can put an 80 mesh or a 30 mesh in here if you need something different, just let your rep know. As you start to go into the system here, this will be where your inlet is coming from, and then we Y off and we go into two 5.3 gallon per minute pumps. Now, as you plug in both of these pumps, the total volume per minute that you can get out is about 5 gallon per minute. You lose about 50% of what the pump can handle from what's advertised once you get everything plumbed in. And these two pumps will work together in parallel, so it's not one is independent from the other. They both work with each other to share the load. And these pumps, again, they're just 12 volt pumps. Coming out of the system, they'll Y back together, and you'll go into a magnetic flow meter. Now, what's so special about the magnetic flow meter is that there's no moving parts in there. It's not like a turbine flow meter where you have a little turbine in there that's spinning, and that's what would read your flow. There's nothing inside of here except for a sensor, and that reads the ions that is in the product. So if you're using something like dicamba that doesn't have the ions on it, but the flow meter can't read, then you wouldn't be able to use the magnetic flow meter. Besides dicamba, though, any product I've ever used, the magnetic flow meter can read. And you don't have to make changes to your flow calibration for product viscosity, or if you were switching from like water or RB antifreeze to a pretty thick product. The magnetic flow meter with a 1 flow cal can handle all of that. So the flow meter itself is also powered by 12 volts. For quick troubleshooting, there's a small LED on the side. That LED will always be on red when the system is powered on, and then when product is flowing through it, it'll be flashing, telling you that it's reading. As you come out of the flow meter, there's a 1/4 inch tubing here, which leads back to this blue and white bleeder valve. Basically, this you would just use for priming. Say if you're running 30 foot of a 3/4 hose out to your spray tip, it's a lot easier to get the air out of the system initially from the bleeder valve than it is to push it out through a small spray tip at your application point. Then you have a pressure gauge as well. Preferably, you want to have some pressure on the system. It helps lock in your target rate. So try not to go below 5 pounds of pressure, but there's really no need to exceed 30 pounds of pressure, 20 pounds of pressure, because once you put more pressure on the pumps, they create more heat. The hotter the pumps get, the more likely they are to die at a sooner rate. So highly recommend keeping your pressure on the lower end if you're able to. Then as we come out of the system, you'll then come up to this elbow, and then you'll reach the outlet of the system, which is on the top right here. Typically, we like to use a 3/4 inch hose to go out to the application point, but if you're applying a low rate product such as 16 ounces a ton, and say your per minute rate would be somewhere from 16 to 32 ounces a minute, even a little more than that. Sometimes we'll use a smaller hose like a 1/2 inch or a 3/8 inch hose as well, but distance can kind of vary on that. So when pricing one of these systems out, just let your rep know roughly how far away you believe this system would be sitting from your application point, and then we can make sure to get you the correct size hose. And then we also offer a spray tip kit. So we have a couple different options, basically a way to, and a couple different brackets to be able to spray your liquid product inside of your vertical blender, rotary drum blender, or if you're using a volumetric kind of auger system. A few different options for that. We can make sure we get you the right size spray tips, so you're putting out an appropriate amount of pressure and getting a good coverage on the product as it's going through the auger. We also include right here on this gray knob, that will be your adjustable bypass valve. Say if you needed to get a lower rate than what the pump system is able to handle, you could open that up and it can help a little bit. You can also use it to relieve the pressure, but you want to make sure you don't open it up too far, or else you're going to recirculate more product than what you're going to send out to your spray tip. Normally, in most cases, that will be kept closed and you won't use it. That's how most guys are using that. Looking at the electronics here, plugging this system in to power it, it runs off of 120 volts. This inverter here will convert everything to 12 volt inside. So even though you power the system with 120 volt, the inverter powers everything with 12 volts. From the inverter, we have our red power switch here. Right now it's off, but you can turn it on and it'll stay red for about 10 to 20 seconds. That just means it's booting up. Once it's booted up, it'll start flashing green, just a steady green flash. Okay, now the system is booted up, so we know we're ready to connect to the system. Before I do that though, I want to explain the rest of the electronics. So behind this panel here is just our power post, positive and negative for your 12 volt. Below that is our PWM controller. PWM stands for pulse width modulation. Pretty much what that means is from our module, when you press start on your tablet and you want to put out, say, 64 ounces in 1 minute, that PWM is going to regulate the voltage going to the pumps to make sure you put out the correct amount of product. But it's also going to work in tandem with the flow meter in the module that we have. So the flow meter is going to read how much product is going through the system. It's going to then tell our module you're over applying, you're under applying, and then it will then tell the PWM to regulate its voltage appropriately to accommodate your rate. At the very top here would be our module, and the module is basically the brain of the entire GX20 unit. On the tablet, when you send a command on the tablet, it sends it to the module. The module will then send out its signals and send out the regulations to all the components that are needed. So the module is also what gives off the Wi-Fi signal. With our tablet, we connect with a Wi-Fi signal, not a Bluetooth, because a Wi-Fi is a stronger signal. Now, we make the Wi-Fi in the system. You don't have to provide the Wi-Fi in your building. And the Wi-Fi is only used as a connection point. So you couldn't connect your phone to it and use it as like a normal router inside your house. It's only as a connection point. Looking inside the electronic portion of the box as well, you'll see that there is a harness here called Product 2 and a harness called Product 3. And essentially with this GX20, if this is my first box, you are also allowed to have 2 separate boxes that can also connect to this box and all be controlled through one tablet. And the point of that would be, so if you're running a total of 2 or 3 different liquid products and the plumbing had to be separate, the 2 liquid products couldn't touch, then you can set this system up and on the tablet so that you can keep your plumbing separate and not have to have another tablet for another box. So your plug-in would be on the side here. Typically we provide a 10-foot cable that would then plug into this connection, and you would just plug and say, like if this were to be my harness, you would plug it in, you would push and twist, and then it will lock into place. And this is the GX20 that's provided with the tablet. So once you boot it up with this on button right here, just press and hold this on button for a few seconds. It'll show Samsung on the front, it'll boot up, and then it'll bring you to this page. What you're gonna be looking for is this GX20 Quick Start app. Tap on that, and then once the app boots up, this is the interface that you're looking at. Most of everything that you're gonna use is gonna be on this dashboard here. There are settings that can be adjusted, but all the settings for you will already be set before you get the system, so you shouldn't have to touch any of the settings. So the first thing you'll want to do once your GX20 is turned on, your green light is flashing, that means you're ready to connect. On this top right here, there's this logo, GX20. You can tap on that, and basically it'll come up with a pop-up saying that it's connecting to the system Wi-Fi. Sometimes it can take about 30 seconds to connect, but once it's connected, you'll get a pop-up on the bottom saying Wi-Fi is connected, but you can also scroll down to the bottom. In this Wi-Fi light here, it'll either be red or green. So red, you're not connected, and green, you are connected. So in this case, I am connected to the system Wi-Fi. As I scroll back to the top, you can either have 3 different systems with this GX20, and basically the plumbing would be kept completely separate, but you can control 3 of these boxes off of one tablet. So right here, this would be my first box, this would be my second box, and this would be my third box. In this case, I only have one box, so I'm just not going to use this third or the second system. I'm only going to use this first system. So right here, if I wanted to change the product name, what I'll do is I'm not going to press product name on the top, but I'm just going to press and hold where it says product 1. And then from here, I can change the name of my product if I wanted to. Here where it says rate and actual gallons, these two you will not be able to change. So what rate will do is when you press start and the system is running, rate will actually show you how many gallons per minute, ounces per minute, liters per minute, whatever measure of units you're reading it. It'll tell you how many gallons per minute you're actually putting out. So here under actual, this will show you how many gallons or quarts or liters or ounces have actually been put out in the batch, in the run that you're currently doing. Right here where it says target, you can put in however many gallons or ounces you want. Underneath time is where you'll want to go first though. And so initially for me, it shows these two dashes. For you, it could also show a number. Press and hold on that value there. You'll get a pop-up and you'll be looking here for product mode. Right now it's in flow by rate. Pretty much what flow by rate means is you can put in whatever target you want and the system will stop automatically once it reaches its target, but you get to control the speed of the pumps. So you get to choose how fast or how slow product is applied into your blender. So typically guys that are using a volumetric, or excuse me, guys that are using a vertical blender or a rotary drum blender typically always use flow by rate. So if I choose flow by rate and I press OK, once I press start, this plus and minus button, you're able to adjust. In this 10 right here, it'll move up or down in a value of 10 depending on if you increase or decrease the speed, and it goes up to 90. So basically you're running the pump at 10% speed. If I hit my plus button twice, I'm running the pump at 30% speed, so you can choose how fast or how slow the GX20 will dump product into your blender. If I go back to time, and commonly the other option that will be used is flow by time and rate. Typically this is used for your volumetric blenders, your declining weight systems. And with this, it allows you to put out a certain gallons per minute under a certain time. So if I want to put out 16 ounces in 1 minute, I'll be running 16 ounces per minute. If I want to put out 32 ounces per minute, let's say, and I'm only doing 2 tons, then I would be putting 16 ounces per minute. So for my time, let's say I want 1 minute, I press OK, and I want to put out less than 1 gallon. Let's say I want to put out 0.25 gallon. Then right now, if I were to press start in 1 minute, I would be putting out a 1/4 gallon. The last option on here will be flow by rate in gallons a minute. Typically, not a lot of guys use flow by rate in gallons per minute. And if you change your unit of measure, say to liters, and it'll say flow by rate in liters per minute. And basically what will happen here is whatever rate you put in, let's say I want to apply 1 gallon per minute, it doesn't allow you to put in a target. So the system does not automatically stop. You have to stop the system whenever you decide you have a sufficient amount in. Now your actual will show you how much has been put out. So if you wanted to eye it and then stop the system yourself, this is what this setting would be for. So when you're first starting the system up and you want to prime the system, the pumps are diaphragm pumps, which means they can run dry for quite a while. We still don't recommend that you run them dry if you can do that. But say if you're kind of priming from a distance, if you have a thick product and it's cold outside, it is okay to run those pumps dry. So what you can do here is press the rinse prime button. And then once you press that rinse prime button, basically the system is going to ask you if you're for sure you want to run the system. You press yes. And then you can hear there the pumps turn on. And basically it's going to run the pump at a certain duty cycle. And this is where you can adjust the duty cycle. So you make the pump put out more, or you can have the pump put out less. But when you're on this rinse prime phase, I'm just going to stop it here. But when you are on this rinse prime phase, It will not show you your Q, and it will not show you your rate. So even if flow is going through the flow meter, it won't show you that product is actually going through. So you keep an eye on those clear plastic Ys that are inside the system and see if you have product there, or look at your spray tip and see if you have product coming out. When you are ready to start the system normally, you just press start up here, and then your system will start from there. And then once you press start, there'll also be a stop button here. You can press stop, and that will of course stop the system. And then the last thing as well is this clear button here. So once you complete a batch, the status will go yellow. Go ahead and press clear. Once you press clear, you are then able to press start again and start your next batch. So all of this would also apply for your system 2 and your system 3. Just go ahead and name your product to whatever product you're using so you don't get confused on which system belongs to which box. Looking at the rest of the system here under settings and operating settings, looking at the start delay here, pretty much what start delay is going to do is when you press start, when you're on your dashboard and you press start on your product, it's going to wait X amount of seconds before the pump actually starts to apply. So say if you put in 4 seconds, you press start. Once you wait 4 seconds, the pump will then start to apply product. Auto prime delay in seconds, basically what that's going to do is as you're priming the system and you don't press the rinse prime button, but you press the start button, after this many seconds of the flow meter not reading product, it's going to shut the system off. And that's basically a safety feature for the pumps. So the best way to prime the system or to rinse the system out, so if you ever need to run the system at a point where you're not going to have liquid in it, so the flow meter's not reading any product, preferably you would press the rinse/prime button. But you could also increase this number, say, to 30 seconds or 90 seconds if you wanted to as well. So when you press start, you don't get the pop-up message saying insufficient liquid, system has automatically been shut off. Insufficient liquid delay, I would recommend keeping this at 5 seconds. So pretty much if you're running the system and say your tote ran out of product and you didn't realize it, when the pump or when the flow meter doesn't read any liquid for X amount of seconds, in this case 5 seconds, it'll shut the system off so it's not continuously applying nothing. It's also a safety feature for the pumps. Your smoothing factor here in percentage, we keep at 3%. Pretty much that would be known as your allowable error. So you would have a 3% allowable error in your application rate. If we go back up to system settings, right here, your unit of measure is in gallons, typically by default, but you can switch to ounces, quarts, or liters. So your pump size for system 1, 2, and 3, this we will put in for you. Typically, most guys are using a 5.3 gallon per minute pump, but something you can do if you're applying at a really low rate, switch to injection pump, even if you're still using the 5.3 gallon per minute pump. And this will help the flow meter read pulses faster, which helps when reading products at lower rate. It helps the pump respond a little quicker. Your flow calibration for the system as well, we will put this in for you. If you were to change this number, your flow meter can say you're still putting out the right amount, but really you could be applying the wrong amount. So we always record the flow meter calibration number on the serial number packet that we give for you. It's included with the manual in case if this were to change, but like I said, we will have this put in for default by you. You don't want to change that number. Here you can just change the name for the systems. So your system 1 start duty cycle and system 2 and 3, pretty much this means, say if you were to run the system in flow by rate and time, your pump will start at a certain duty cycle. So your duty cycle ranges on the low end of 3% and up to 99%. So right now, whenever I start the system, it's going to start at 10%. Say if I'm running the system at a very low rate, then I could set this duty cycle to a lower percentage so my pump doesn't shoot up so high and then have to work its way down to get to my target rate. But also say if I'm applying at a lower rate, now I want my pump to start up even faster so I can get to my target rate faster. Then I could increase this number as well to do that. Your delta would also be your allowable error. Typically keep that at 0.2%. And then your valve response rate it has a low range of 1 and up to 15. Pretty much what this setting will do is It's different from the start duty cycle, in where the valve response rate will affect how fast or how slow the pump will respond to a change in rate. Typically, the setting you don't want too quick, or your pump is always going to surge, but you also don't want it too low to where your pump is too slow to respond to rate, and you would spend a majority of the time putting out the incorrect rate. So typically the valve response rate will always be at 5. Normally you don't ever have to touch that. And then the last option you would have is help and about. Basically what you're going to look for here is the version name, build date, and install date. Mainly you would use this for tech support. If you're having an issue, you call AgXcel, and we'll need to know the version of the app that you're using. We're constantly updating the app with new features, so if you call up and you needed a new version of the app, let us know. We can send the new version of the app out to you.